Thank you so much, Ishani. Uh, Welcome everyone. I can see we still have people joining. So we'll just wait for a couple of minutes. But while we are waiting, all of us, thank you so much for taking out the time to invest in our students to understand how we can support them better. May I request you to put in the chat box which part of the country or the region are you joining from? Thanks, Aishwarya. Great. So we have people from India, Bangladesh. Okay, within India, a lot of cities, diversity from Jaipur, Mumbai, Hyderabad, Bangalore, Pune, Bhutan. Excellent. That's very nice. We'll just wait for a couple of minutes more. But while we are waiting, I would like you all to just reflect on uh, how the IGCSE Economics course enables the learners, based on whatever experience you've had, enables them to be prepared for life. What is it about the IGCSE economics curriculum which helps them become prepared for life? What skills, what content knowledge, what is it that is so useful for them that they feel better prepared? Thank you, Anjali. Real life applications, Anupma says strong perspective. Thank you so much. May I request everyone to set their chat settings to everyone so that everyone can benefit from the chat? I think right now it's not set to everyone. Incorporating real life examples linking to concepts. Thank you, Charu. Strong analytical skills. Pooja, thank you for that. Analyzing different sides of a problem. Excellent. Very nice. I mean, introspective analysis. Ashita, thank you. Balance. A lot of words we are seeing, which I think we'll be seeing in the presentation also. Consider various aspects. Evaluating different scenarios. Thank you so much, Namira. Brings in the concept of context. Recalling key facts. Very, very important. We can't just negate the importance of content. Knowledge about world policies like trade union, foreign exchange policy. Thank you. Excellent. So, with that start, I think we are ready to begin. So, welcome to the IGCSE and O levels economics syllabus and course materials for examination from 2027 onwards. This is the new guide. And as you're familiar, there have been changes that have been made to the existing guide. A little bit about myself. My name is Anvita. I'm a Cambridge trainer. I'm also an examiner for IGCSE and O level economics for almost 15 years now. and I have over 20 years of teaching experience in both school and college sector together. I'm passionate about student and teacher education because I believe in paying forward. Because when I was new, I had a great set of mentors, and I feel that with the changes that keep happening in the world and the subject that we have is so dynamic that it's important that we pass on whatever skills we learn to our students and our fraternity alike. With that, let's do a quick warm up. So, we'll be launching a poll. What I want you to do is think of these skills. Ishani, may I ask you to launch the poll number 1, please? Yeah, these are certain skills we've talked about. It was there. So the idea is rank them according to how difficult your students find them, from most difficult to least difficult, with 1 being most difficult and 6 being least difficult. These are skills we've talked about right now in the chat box that we felt were needed for IGCSE Economics, which made it so useful. Very nice. As I can see, we are getting Okay, so analysis and reflection appear to be ones which seem to be very challenging. Evaluation, I I agree. Even when I look at my part students, so communication appears to be a skill which most of us feel is manageable by the students. Reflection, evaluation, the ones which seem to be getting the maximum votes for being in the top two, 1 or 2. We still have only 50% participation so far. We're just waiting for some more. So almost 15% of us find the reflection skills to be very difficult. Almost 41% feel evaluation is difficult. And 11% feel analysis. Like I said, collaboration, communication seem to be skills which seem to come naturally to our learners. We'll just keep the poll open for another minute. Oh, great. So we'll end the poll now. We have almost 62% participation. And some of us, yeah, I'm coming to the chat box. Some of us have also mentioned this over here. That's very nice. Thank you so much for that. Great. So now that we've thought about a little bit about the skills which are needed, we come to the aims of this particular session, which is to understand what is it that this session is aiming at. The first is a broad overview of the Cambridge IGCSE and O-level economics program. What are we as educators or as Cambridge trying to achieve through this program, become more confident in using the print and digital resources to support teaching, become more familiar with setting up to teach IGCSE and O level economics, know how to approach planning using the print and digital resources. Very often in my past trainings, this has been a very common question that has come across, that we have the scheme of work in this school support hub, but uh, you know the resources sometimes are a challenge. So we thought, let's kind of bring the two together, blend the two. So that's where this aim comes from. Know where to access further support. That, of course, because this is just a small session, how do I get support beyond the session? That's also important. And have the opportunity to ask questions. At the end of the session, we will be allowing certain questions. In the meantime, if you want, if something comes up during the presentation, you can always put it in the Q&A section, and we will be answering all questions at the end of the session. Uh, so please feel free. I would just request uh, not to ask questions during the session because it might just break the flow and may make it difficult. But please be assured we will answer all questions that are being asked. Great. So this is from the IGCSE syllabus guide. This is the cover page. You're very familiar with this. So what are we focusing on? This is taken from the guide. Cambridge IGCSE Economics focuses on how scarce resources are organized in a world that faces many challenging economic and environmental issues. Very important, we're using economic and environmental issues because the resources are interlinked with the environment, and their use is definitely linked with economics. So both of them are a key area. Studying this subject provides learners with the opportunity to learn about the basic economic concepts, how to explain, analyze, evaluate, organize, present, and communicate ideas clearly. So if you see, a lot of terms that we have used in the last 10 minutes have come up. So this is where they're taken from. And the idea is that students should just not understand, but should also be able to explain, analyze, evaluate the different economic issues, and organize and also present, communicate the ideas clearly. So hopefully we are a group of teachers where we find communication easier for our students based on the poll that we just had. But so this is what our basic aim is. I'm sure you're familiar with this, the the Cambridge learner attributes. And in the guide, this is taken again from the guide, they are mentioned in terms of economics. Because remember, we are not just aiming at students to get an A star or an A, we are helping them become knowledgeable about the subject so that they are confident in using the terminology, concepts, theories, and principles of economics so that they get a good foundation. We're not expecting expert economists out of it, but we create a good foundation so that they feel confident about pursuing the course later. Responsible by being able to consider the consequences of economic decisions. This is where the balanced perspective came in, including the impacts of those decisions on people and the environment. So, in the chat box, some of us had written multiple perspectives. This is where that responsible attribute is evident. Reflective, an attribute we thought was difficult for our students because we said reflection as a skill was difficult to master. By considering different sides of an economic argument and being aware of the possible uncertainties of alternative decisions and outcomes. Innovative through the application of economic knowledge and understanding to current and future economic challenges. So, again, the idea is not just absorbing what is happening now, but also plan for the future. And therefore, where innovation would be required. How can I use this resource in a more effective manner? Engage to the development of economic awareness and by being able to practice constructively in society and in economy. So those are some of this is how the learner attributes become evident in the economics course. Like before, this has not changed. Our subject content is divided into 6 parts: the basic economic problem, allocation of resources, microeconomic, government, and economic development, international trade. Now, before I move forward, uh, I just want to have a heads up. If you can put in the chat box, is this the order you teach in, or you make a change to the order? Because IGCSE does not mandate any order. IGCSE just says that these are the syllabus areas you have to cover, but it does not say that it has to be in this order. So I'm just interested in knowing that as teachers, do we use the same order? Thank you, Anu. Anu says it's the same order. No change, same order, this order, follow the order. Excellent, very nice. Great. So most of us seem to be following this. Mamta has a different opinion. She says we do 1, 2, 3, 4, and 6, and then do 5. Absolutely fine. But most of us seem to be following this order. Now, keeping this in mind, Ishani, may I ask you to launch poll 2, please? Let me know which areas within this subject content do the students struggle with. Okay. The areas you as teachers find challenging or your students might struggle with, either of the two. Section 2. Anupama, may I ask you to just put it in the poll that's been launched, please? Thank you. Especially graphs. Okay. International trade seems to be one which seems to be challenging, getting a lot of votes there. Mm-hmm. Macroeconomics, international trade, units 1 and 2 seem to be relatively easy for the students and the five. So I think based on whatever we received so far, the most challenging appear to be government and unit 4 and unit 6. I will try to incorporate as many examples as when we come to resources from this area, because this kind of resonates with what my classroom experience also has been, because students seem to find it difficult to understand the concept of macroeconomics, the role of the government, because it becomes a little abstract for them maybe. And similarly, international trade. Microeconomics, they are able to relate to, I think, in a much more easier manner with real life examples. The economy part of it tends to be a little difficult. But thank you so much for that. So we can end the poll now. Section 4, 6, 4 and 6, absolute exchange rate. So I think what's written in the chat box seems to embody what we saw in the poll. Right. Now, with the change in the syllabus, how many of you, or what is your reaction? I would like you to put in the chat box the one word that is coming to your mind when you think about delivering or that you have been delivering it for 1 year because 2027 is the first assessment. Uh, what is your feeling about it? Do you feel excited, apprehensive? One word that kind of sums up your feeling about teaching the new guide. Some of us might be absolutely new, might have students coming in grade 9 for the first time. But I'm interested in knowing how do we feel about the new guide? Apprehensive. Thank you, Anu, for that. It it is let me assure you that most of the syllabus remains the same, but yes, there are changes, especially to the assessment structure. Anybody else who would like to share? Interesting. Okay, oriented towards assessment, exciting, challenging with assessments. Very nice. So let's look at where can we find the support that we need to deliver this particular new guide, which has a range of emotions for us from interesting to apprehensive to excited, right? Uh, so let's quickly look at this Mentimeter. You can scan the QR code or you could go to menti.com. Okay. What are the top 2 things you would need to teach the new syllabus effectively? It could be anything. It could be a physical resource. It could be a digital. It could be anything. In the word, if you could just go to this and paste, please. Physical resources. Thank you. Resources, understanding. I hope all of us are able to access the Menti. Interest and confidence, videos, guidelines, structure. Creativity, past papers. How can we use past papers? Very true. Because not all past papers are no longer useful. Training, understanding, worksheets and activities. Excellent, very nice. So I think a lot of it is centering around resources. If we have good resources, whether physical or digital in the form of videos, we can create interesting deliveries, guidelines, real life examples. Very true. That's case studies. Cambridge skills exercises. Thank you so much. Case studies, of course, very important for paper 2 section A also, that we need to have access to case studies which we can use. And I think if we see, this all really works very well together, what we have mentioned over here. If we have an understanding and the resources, then we are able to enhance our delivery. We are able to enhance the understanding of students. Excellent. Very, very nice. Thank you so much. Proper preparation. Yes, if I have the resources and planning, the proper preparation should be easy for me. In the chat box, real life new articles should know how to train the students for evaluation based questions. Very, very true. The assessment objectives. So I'm going to move ahead now. Thank you so much for all these very, very apt words, which kind of encompass what we really need. And this is the support that we have from Cambridge in the form of their resources, both physical and digital. So there is a Cambridge IGCSE O-level course book, and there is a workbook for the learners. And for us as two teachers, there's also the digital teachers resource. So I'll show you the resource. How many of us have been using these? If you could just put in the chat box, you're familiar with this, with the course book and the workbook. If you can just put it in the chat box that you've using it or heard of it, whatever word you want to use. Course book is being used, using it, very good. Familiar. Not heard of the digital resource, not the teacher resource, okay. No, all the input sources, thank you. So I'll take you through this to kind of just help you understand how each of these are going to help us with whatever we felt, whatever we said in the Mentimeter is needed by us in order to create or in order to deliver the new syllabus very clearly. So this is the digital teachers resource, which has a lot of activities, right? It's basically a one-stop solution for delivering the course. It's got economics in context, it's got economics in action, activities, practice questions. Let me just take you through so it's got 78 lesson plans, which cover all the topics, and the way they are presented, it aligns with the Cambridge syllabus guide. So the words that have been taken are taken from the Cambridge syllabus guide itself, so it makes it easier. The order, the wording, so that the alignment is much, much better. So I'll just stop this for a moment and take you to the Cambridge teacher resource. Right, so this is the teacher resource. This is on Cambridge Go website. So if you see, it has got a number of resources. You can download these, and once they are downloaded, I'll just show you the ones that we have here. So for examples, here you have teaching notes, which are resources for each of the sections. Let me just show this to you. Are you still able to view my screen? If you could just put it in the chat box, I'll know.
Yes, ma'am, it's visible.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So if we look at this, the basic economic problem, if you have access to your syllabus right now, you can see this. These are the words taken from the syllabus guide. There is the learning content. Where in the resources can I find the information needed to address this particular topic along with the learning hours? Right? Now, these are again prescriptive. They're not supposed to be followed to the T. Each context is a little different. And If I were planning this, I have the course book, I have the teacher's resource, I have the workbook, and it tells me exactly when. So that makes my planning so much more simpler, right? This is followed by background knowledge, language support. We'll come to this again when we do the planning part, which is a little later in the um, session. But if you see over here, whatever we think about when we go to deliver a class, the thoughts that come to our mind, we need activities, right? We need some kind of teaching ideas. We need some kind of assessment, differentiation. So this is only, and this is available for each of the chapters. It's not only for this chapter. Like I showed you, this is there for the teaching notes are there for each of the sections, right? So we move on to factors of production. So within section A, all the chapters, within section 2, all the chapters, and so on. Just give you a moment to have a look at this. I'll repeat, this is all available on the Cambridge Go website, which is which has a trial pack. If any one of you is interested after this session, you can leave your details. We'll get in touch with you. Very, very important common misconceptions. Like, for example, students often believe that the term land refers to fields and soil, whereas it actually refers to all natural resources. I remember maybe 3 or 4 years back, there was a question in the examination paper which talked about discussing how you can increase land, 2 ways to increase land. A lot of students didn't do well because they could think of one way, which was clearing forest, but they really couldn't think of another way. So it's important if we discuss it with them over here, where they understand it's not just field and soil, but all naturally occurring resources. So this is all based on what has been observed from the examination papers, based on the principal examiner's reports, the common misconceptions. So this is very, very useful, especially when we are doing this in class. I'll stop sharing and go back to my. Yeah, so this is available. There is also a scheme of work which is there, and I'm sure you're all familiar with the scheme of work. So, with the help of the scheme of work, a common complaint with the scheme of work used to be that certain links don't work because the scheme of work has been prepared at a certain time. But over here, if you access the teacher resource, it is giving you examples of where to connect in the course book and the workbook. So that kind of makes it a composite thing. Yes, Rohit. Ishan, if you could just unmute Rohit. Rohit, if you could just type, I think because there's some issue, if you could just type your question or query in the Q&A, I'll come back to you. Right, moving ahead. Okay, so based on not only on this session, based on your experience so far, how confident do you feel in accessing the resources that are needed for delivering the new syllabus? Okay, you just need to type SCU, whichever you feel, because we hope that by the end of it, your confidence would have grown. All three familiar, very useful. I'm glad to see most of us are have a certain confidence level in accessing the resources. Where all do you access the resources from currently? Where all do you access? For example, the school support hub or any other sites, school support hub. Cambridge Go and School Support Hub, assessment objective worksheets, okay, the skill exercises, Support Hub. Great. So with this, we come to the course book. So we've seen the teacher resource, which is basically helping you to plan and deliver a lesson. But we also need to know how a student's course book looks like. What is it in the student's course book, which will be useful for the student so that he can prepare better? Because end of the day, they sit for an exam and they also need to feel confident. So this is written by Susan Grant, who is one of the principal examiners. It's divided into the 6 sections that match the structure of the syllabus, comprises 36 chapters, and each one focuses on a particular topic. And very, very important, it includes a useful 11-page glossary of key terms and concepts. A word over here I would like to add is that very often when I'm marking papers, I find that students do not know, especially the 2 mark where, simple questions which require them just to define a concept or give an understanding of the concept. They tend to mix that up or use language which is not appropriate to economics. So it's very, very advantageous if they can be encouraged to use the glossary pages or create their own glossary with accurate terminologies, because at times I've seen some very good students not perform. So I know they know the concept, but they do not have the communication skills. So therefore this glossary which is there is very, very useful. So like I said, where does it come from? What all does it have? It's got economics and context case studies and action case studies, the key terms, tips, very, very important. Again, these are based on the past year paper, what we've seen as examiners. What is it that they should be talking about? The misconceptions, the discussion suggestions, the activities, reflection suggestions. Because remember, this is aligned with the teacher resources. So all this is also available for them. I'll again demonstrate this to you. And this time I'll take a chapter from section 4, which we said was a little difficult for the students. So I'll just go back to, I'll do a live demo first, then we'll come back to this. Just give me a moment, please. And here we come. Right, so this is, let me take it to the first page. This is the course book from Cambridge. You all are using, most of you seem to be familiar, are using the the physical copy. This is a digital copy of the same. And if I am to go to the government section, I'm using government as an example because we felt that that was one area we could get some help with. A very important factor here is this bookmark. If you see at the bottom, so that kind of helps the student kind of highlight pages which he wants to come back to. Right. So the macro, again, the learning intentions are taken from the syllabus. So it's very, very clear. If you see explain, analyze, explain, discuss, these are command terms very common in the question paper also. So the students also understand the depth to which they are supposed to know the concept, the content that they're going to be using. Remember, I said there is economics in context. So there's this case study from economic problem about Sweden's economic problems. And case study examples we felt were needed to do a good job. So this kind of bridges the gap between the abstract, helps the students understand that this is something which is happening in the world or where people across the countries are facing certain problems. So there's some information, and then again discuss in a pair or group. So you see that there is collaboration happening right there and then. So what do you think is the economic problem facing your economy? So they've discussed and they've tried, they want you to draw a parallel with your own country's economy. Right? And then from there, once you understand the problems, it brings you gently towards the macroeconomic aims of the government. I don't need to explain this to you. This is there in the physical book also. But this is what is most important. So if you see, if I go to there's a number of possible causes of chapter, and if I click on this, it takes me to the relevant chapter, and I can go back and revise. So when I'm actually doing macroeconomic objectives, I understand that why those objectives exist, why is economic growth an objective, how can it happen, what are the advantages. It's a quick revision for me before I go back to my chapter. Let me go back to this. Possible conflicts. And again, if you see, there's this tip over here, right? What is it that you should keep in mind as a student? And when you are discussing, so when considering macroeconomic performance, it is important to show that you're aware of the events in your own economy and other economies to help you find out and make a note of the unemployment rate, inflation rate, economic growth rate, and current account position of your country. Compare them with figures for three major economies. This is again a skill which is tested in a lot of questions in section in paper 2 in section A, where they give you a table and there are different uh, economic objectives given, which you are then expected to comment on. So there's an activity and of course the reflection, and again followed by in the end economics in action, which helps them understand something which is happening in the real world. In the end, we have the summary questions, right? The summary pointers. A good idea is to ask the students to rag rate it. Are you familiar with the concept of rag rating? If you could just put it in the chat box. Okay, so rag rating is basically a strategy. It's like the traffic light system. Yeah. So rag rating is R stands for red, A stands for amber, and G stands for green. So R is basically a student who R means I don't understand anything about what is happening, right? Amber is I understand it some bit, and green is I'm super confident about this. So a good idea is once the chapter is over, the last 2 minutes when everything, once you finish the chapter with them, they're just trying to wrap up everything. Ask them to quickly just write down against each of these points what is their confidence level, right? You could do it if you want, you can do it as an activity with them, whether just kind of drop it in. If you have physical sheets, they drop it, or they just tell you the ones that they feel they have an R in. Like, for example, low and stable inflation creates certainty and avoids a loss of international competitiveness. I don't think I really know it. I would like this to be explained again, so I just rate it at R. But I know economic growth can improve living standards by increasing the availability of goods and services. I know this really well. I put it at a G. So it's a good quick check for the students to know where they stand. And without us having to ask them again and again, do you understand this or not? And when they take onus of reflecting and putting these notations against each of these terms, they take onus of the learning. So it's there for them. They know when they're revising. A lot of times, at least in my what I have experienced is, students will come to me and they say, "Can we just revise this chapter?" Now, if instead of that, we talk about which points do you want to revise over here, and they have this rag rating already done, then we'll be going faster, and the revision also is much more comprehensive with them. Okay, so I'm going to stop presenting and just give me a moment. Right. So what I showed you, this is just a repetition of that, right? So the link to different chapters, if you click on the link, it takes you, these are screenshots, so I can't do that. But remember the key role of price mechanism, depending on what chapter we are in. This is taken from different chapters, is not from the same chapters. The activities are there, both as a learning active, which help the students as well as the teacher in planning and students in execution. Right? Disadvantages of the market economy, we've already talked about that. The link, the group activity, the summary. So at this point, this is what all is there in the students resources. And then to support this, because remember, there are only very few questions which are there in the course book, we have the workbook. And this workbook has questions which are aimed at creating or developing skills that the students will need in the examination. And beyond the examination, in understanding the economic concept so that they can apply it to real life scenarios much after they have finished their IGCSE program. So, what does it look like? There are definitions, missing words, there are calculations, interpreting diagrams. Some of us had said that diagrams seem to be a bit of a struggle for the students. MCQ questions, similarities and differences, data response questions again, which are needed for your section A in paper 2, the 4-part questions, part of section B, and very important, improving an answer. So again, I'll take you to the workbook. Let me just go to. So this is the IGCSE workbook. It's worth investing in with the students because, like I said, chapter wise, it is giving you all the questions which or the activities that you would need. So let's say, for example, let me go to international economics now. Trade and globalization. Globalization and trade restriction. Again, if you see, this is taken from the guide again. The key terms students should know. Sorry for that. Yeah, the key terms the students should know. Again, please make sure if they are, so all these terms are important from the exam perspective. They must understand the concept on these terms, exactly how they should be defined. Like in microeconomics, what is a shift and what is movement in a demand curve or a supply curve? Very often confused by the students, right? What's a quota? What's a subsidy? Again, a very common problem that we find that students tend to become confused with tariffs and quotas, which should not happen. But so they understand it's a protectionist measure, but how does it work? That mechanism seems to be a little difficult for them, right? Key skill activities, information, and then there are questions. So this is there, you can information on different countries. A government imposes a tariff. There's a question. Okay, let's look at this question together. A government imposes a tariff on electric vehicles produced in other countries to support its infant vehicle industry. And there are different scenarios given. So it's like, a quick way of recapping. You've explained this, you're giving them different scenarios, and the resources right here. All you have to do is kind of, help them and ask them to do a reason. The moment they give a reason, they are justifying, they're analyzing their answer. So without really telling them we're using the skills of analysis and justification, we are actually helping them develop those skills. And one of the problems the students seem to have is writing long answers. So without really telling them write an 8 marker or a 6 marker, we are helping them develop the skills they will use in writing 6 and 8 mark answers. Okay. So this is interesting. This kind of shows the connections between the words. For example, there's dumping. Where can I use? With what word will dumping go well? Okay. Or what word groups go well together? So that again helps them group, helps them understand. And these are all short, you have entry tickets. I'm sure you're familiar with the concept of entry tickets. Once the students are coming in, all you've told them, okay, today we are doing this chapter. We finished the basics. Can you all go to this particular page? Try finishing in this word connect. And because it's just short words, they do not have that problem. And then comes the self-assessment. Can you explain? Again, your RAG rating works well over here. And if you see over here, this line, remember a tariff is a tax on imports or exports, whereas a quota. The reason this is over here is because it's a very commonly misunderstood concept. MCQs directly linked to the chapter and, of course, paper one. And then we have the key, right? And there's a worksheet which you can work on, and so again. How many of us have used these before? If you can just put it in the chat box, you've used the workbook or are using the workbook, either digital or physical. Okay, so I see a few of us are using, not everyone. Because I do understand that there is a paucity of time. That's why I'm saying that, use pickup activities, use them as entry and exit tickets. That is when the students are kind of winding up, that's an exit ticket. You want to quickly do a check with them. Or when they're settling in and you may be taking attendance, those 5 minutes, you don't want them talking to each other. Just get into the work using physical. Okay. Thank you for that. And like I said, practice questions as a sample answer. I'm sorry, this is from a different part of the section, but this is what also is there in the workbook, because a number of times we come across in the workshops where we are asked if we can have access to certain sample answers. There always seems to be a paucity of sample answers. And the interesting thing is that the idea is an answer is given, the student has to improve it, and there are pointers given on how to improve it, right? So usually a sample answer which is given to students either is already a very high mark answer, and someone who is not as uh, well versed with the language struggles with it. But if I give them a very simple answer and ask them to improve it by giving them these pointers, this is very, very useful with your uh, 8 markers. So it does, I know it's going to take time, it's worth what if you can do this with them maybe once a month also, it's time well spent with the students, where you give them a very basic answer and ask them to improve it. Once they do that, they themselves will understand the depth which is needed when we are doing the 8 mark answers. So if I were to go to the content page again, I mean, we could keep exploring this, right? But I think that's really, really important that, we understand what each one means. There's a definition, like I said, in the course book, you have the glossary page. And here we have the skill activities. It's worth spending time because it does add value to the students. So I'm going to stop presenting again. Yes, there is. So Anjali has a question. If we want the students to check their answers amongst themselves, is there an access to answers to questions? Yes, there is an access to that. It's there on the Cambridge course. I'll just show you the home page. Um, So if once you click on, I'm not, so these are all like, this is of course is a master account, so has all the possible resources. But if you once you subscribe to Cambridge Go, you get access to all these resources, right? So you have the workbook and course book, which I've just shown you. There are the answers to the book. And this also has answers to the workbook and the course book both. So if I were to go here, you've got the course book, workbook, worksheets, which are there in the teacher resource, which I showed you. They're all available over there. So you can download it at a click, or depending on what you want to do, and then, just upload it on the classroom for the students to do their peer evaluation. Let me go back to this now. Please bear with me. I'll just go back to my So all these resources are very much available here. Great. Right. So going back to my, so these are some of the key skills which are needed when a child is doing IGCSE economics, or for that matter, economics as a subject. You should be able to interpret diagrams, draw diagrams, interpret data, interpret graphs, analyze economic issues, evaluate economic choices, prepare for the exams. So if you see, a lot of these skills have been taken from the syllabus guide itself. And if we do these activities with the students, it's important that they understand how this works so that they are able to perform to the best of their abilities, because a number of times when they understand the content but they're not able to deliver the answer, then it becomes a a stressful situation both for the teacher and the student, because when he's explaining it to you verbally, he's able to do a good job, but when the moment he's writing it, it just seems to go haywire. So that's why it's so important that they have different ways in which they are able to learn. Okay. How many classes are allowed for economics in a week? There's no classes allowed in a week per se, but I think on an average, usually schools have at least 3 classes. But I mean, if others are happy to answer this, right? Because there's no mandate given by Cambridge that they need to have so many classes as such, because every school has a different, time slot for a period. Some have 40-minute periods, some have an hour period. 4 classes. But what is the duration of each class? If you could tell us that, that would also help. 45 minutes. Thanks, Neha. Anybody else who would like to add? 40 minutes. Aduma, how many classes? 40. So I think 40-45 minutes appears to be common. 40-minute classes. Five, 50 minutes, 3 classes. So roughly, if we say 4 classes, 40-45 minutes, I think that's the norm. 6 classes, okay. And how long are these 6 classes, the duration? 50 minutes, 3 classes, 40 minutes. Okay. Thanks. Thanks, Pushpika. So, like I said, the mandated is 120 hours. Oh, just a moment, I'm sorry. So you need roughly about 120 hours to finish the course. That's how it's planned. So there is always a time, I'm not saying at any point, because you also have to revise. There are also exams and so many activities which keep happening. That's why we need to draw on small activities and not just, go across and, try to do everything at one go. Okay. So this is the RAG rating. I've just added this. So red in this case is if there is any query, I'm going to give you a 2-minute pause, whatever we've done so far. If you can put it in the Q&A. Third edition is, there was a question that was asked. Third edition is the latest we are following. Yeah. So if there is anything that you would like me to answer, just kind of, when you're putting in the question, put it as an R. That's like really, really urgent. Okay. Anything that you think is nice, you've like really learned, and that's going to be super useful, put a green. Something you're not so sure about, just mention that you want to know more about this. And if it is in the purview of the course today, I'll try to answer it. Giving you 2 minutes to do so. Great, Neha. Thank you. Anupma, you had a question. Anybody else who would like to share in the chat box? A few of the questions are very tricky. How can we help students to answer such questions apart of, okay. So what I do with my students is that I ask them to, instead of just going ahead and marking the right one, to ask for all questions, like let's say if they're doing an MCQ paper. Instead of giving them 20 questions at a go, I give them 15. But I tell them that give me a reason why you think this is the answer. So once we understand the rationale behind why they're answering, we can then help them understand that why that is wrong. Okay. So when the student is saying, and and then give me a reason for, you could start out with maybe just say three questions. Tell them why do you think this option is wrong and why do you think the answer is right. When they think about it like that, okay, you might not want them to write it. You just might want them to verbally defend their choice. But the moment they start thinking about the options, then they'll slowly get into that practice of trying to first find out, cross out the ones which are wrong, and then coming to the right answer. Usually, what I've seen is what students do is they just say, okay, fine, this looks fine. And they tend to forget, like, you know, which of these factors do not increase the elasticity of demand. And they will forget not to use not. So they've read it in one go. And they'll just say, oh, they all look same because they're all referring to elasticity of demand, totally forgetting that the question is which of them is not referring to this. So underlining the key words in the question and identifying the wrong ones, then coming to the right one, that is something that I've found to be very useful. Yeah, so like the improve the answer which I showed you, which is there in the workbook in Cambridge in Cambridge Go website, right? So that's a very effective way. You just have you're giving them a sample, a basic answer, and asking them to improve it as to look at what is missing and then improve it. Okay, and instead of giving going directly to 8-mark questions, make them work with 2, 4, 6-mark questions. That's going to be useful because it's a process. First, once they understand how the depth in six, then only can they go ahead. Okay. Okay. So I can understand that. The moment you have a discussion happening, students want to bring in so many pointers and you don't want to dissuade them. What you can do is encourage them to whatever factor they're discussing in, maybe make an assignment for them and say, okay, fine, let's have this discussion that you want to have. Put in the key pointers and upload it as a task for them. That ask them, okay, this particular topic, let's say, for example, the war which is going on right now, we want to evaluate, we want to analyze that war. Okay, discuss 3 points in favor, three against from the economics perspective, right? Which will encourage them to research and at the same time also given the pointers. Like I said, if you use the small activities which are given in the workbook, like for example, the terms which were given, if you use those as an entry activity, so the students are already thinking about what's happened without you going over the whole topic again with them, then we work with the activities given in the course book. Okay, maybe a group discussion. I think a group discussion is a very effective way. If we do those activities, and then there are certain topics which we have to use as lecture based approach. Okay, now certain questions that are there, I will come to a little later because I want to move ahead, right? So Yes, the new syllabus is for students who will write the exam in 2027. Right. So somebody had asked how many activities can I actually be using? Okay. So before we go into, so we're not going to go into the depth of this because that is beyond the purview of this. Ishani, can you please launch poll 3, please? How familiar are you with these terms? Okay. So on a scale of 1 to 3, if you can rate, how familiar are you with these terms? With 1 being most familiar and 3 being least familiar. Yes, Praveen. Ishani, if you can unmute Praveen while the poll is still going on, we can address his query.
So, as the poll is currently going on, I will request Mr. Praveen to kindly mention the question in the chat box.
Metacognition seems to be the one that we are not as familiar with. So I'm glad to see all of us know, most of us know assessment for learning and active learning. Those are key when we are delivering the Cambridge syllabus. We are exactly at 50% responses. If we can have quickly a few more before we move forward. Excellent. So we'll end the poll now. And so let's look at some of these terms. Active learning is different from activity-based learning, although both require activities. But the idea is they learn by doing. There has to be an objective at the end of the task. It's not that, for example, if there is a group discussion, there is a question they're trying to come to a common consensus to, or look at different perspectives. Sorry? Okay. Yeah, I think. Okay. Oh, sorry. Yeah. Assessment for learning, this will help. So this is giving feedback right there when we are teaching. So for example, drag rating is a way of assessment for learning, trying to assess right there where the student is faltering so that they don't make the mistakes. All these misconception tips that are mentioned in the workbook and the course book, right? These are all ways for the students to understand how they can correct themselves. Differentiation is involving the individual needs. When we do the planning part, which is the next part of this, uh, so that we understand. So each we meet the individual needs of the learners. We're not just, assessing them all with the same metric, or we're not asking them, expecting them to have the same level of skill. We understand they will have different skills and how to help them improve their skills from where they were. Okay. Metacognition is thinking, basically thinking about, for example, I'll give you a brief thing, which is like at the end of the exam, once the paper is over or the test is over, encourage the students to reflect on what went well for them and why did it go well, or what didn't go well and why didn't. So when you reflect on that, right, you don't need to do it in a classroom scenario, but when you encourage students to do that kind of activity, then they understand, oh, I wrote answers, so my I think I understood better, or maybe because I discussed it with my friend or my teacher, I understood this better. So, or I just kind of just learned the whole thing, which didn't work so well. So, when I understand that, I make adjustments as a student so that I can improve. Or as a teacher, I go back and I say, oh, today's lesson was fabulous, right? I think this really worked with this class. I'm sure we've all been doing that without consciously calling it metacognition. And skills for life, of course, the skills that the students learn in economics are transferable. Right. Coming back to planning as a teacher, right? So we'll quickly look at these are some of the elements. Now, each of our schools may have a different one. There are some templates which are there in the teacher's guide on the school support hub. Do you use the same template or do you use a different one? If you can just put that in the chat box. Are we using the template which is there on the school support hub, or do we use a different one? Okay, there's difference. Okay. Anybody else who would like to answer? So are there any other pointers? So for example, learning intentions and success criteria, these are taken from the syllabus document. Language support, starter activities, main activities, planning assessment for learning and differentiation, planning reflection and plenary, and then planning the homework. These are the key aspects that should be there in a lesson plan, which are also there in the teacher guide. I'll take you to the teacher resource again, and we'll look at each of these individually. Any other aspect that's there in your lesson plans which is not there over here? These are the section headings. If they're the same as what was written over there, I'm sorry. Is nobody seems to have answered. Nobody. So I'm. These are the key factors, key section headings that we feel are needed in order to run a lesson well. So I'm going to stop sharing, and instead of showing you screenshots, I'll take you to the teacher resource where we can look at each of these together. Just give me a moment. Right. So this is the teacher resource for, this is the one that's downloaded with me, so I'm using this again. So if we see over here, this is the first chapter, the teaching plan. If you were to compare this with the syllabus document, you will find all of these are exactly the same terminologies. And we start with here. So this is for this particular topic. There's a learning plan from the syllabus content is mentioned. What is it that the students are expected to know because of this? And as a success criteria, how do I know that the students have understood this? Right? And in some lesson plans, you might want to kind of define it further and say most students and all students, depending on how basic or advanced the skill needed is. And if you see, this is again taken from the syllabus guide. This is all there in the syllabus guide. Then there are common misconceptions, again taken from the past year papers. So when you're planning a lesson, it kind of makes it so much easier. All you have to do is pick up this from here, right? And post it in whatever template you are using. Students often assume that economists define a free good as one that does not cost any money to buy, and then ask the students to define the free good. How do you explain it? Right? It's not just enough to say, okay, there's a problem here. How do I then explain to them that free goods are goods that take no resources? It's not about the price, right? So the idea is you also, it tells you beforehand what is a certain pitfalls to look out for, which is a common thing across the world. Okay, there's a starter activity. You could make it as uh, in depth or as small as you want, right? Why would you buy? So if you see, they're trying to use active learning to reinforce the concept of scarcity, reinforce the concept of opportunity cost here. So we have a learning outcome, which is the concept. What do I need? So all you have to do is, if you have access to this, you just have to go and deliver this in the classroom, right? So see, they've also given us indicators. So now, like we said, some of us said it takes me, so right now, if you're delivering this chapter, if it takes you 2 days, you know how you want to stagger this or scaffold this, how you want to break it up, maybe into smaller activities, right? So with the help of an ice cream teaching idea, you explain scarcity, basic economic problems, create a scenario. So they've given you an example. You can use this or you could adapt it. A lot of AI available which can be used. Then there are these differentiation ideas. How can I differentiate it to meet the needs of my different learners with different abilities, right? So we're looking at the vocab preview. How do I introduce the key economic terms, provide sample definition and examples, right? And then if you give them sample definitions, and then if you follow it up with the workbook, maybe give them as a homework task or a 5-minute end of class task, where you say, fine, okay, we did these definitions. Can you quickly in the workbook also maybe do a match the following or fill in the blanks, whatever corresponds in the workbook, right? And then also extend their learning, challenge them. Not every learner required support. There's certain who want to challenge themselves. Ensure that we are able to meet their needs also. So these are all different. You don't have to do all of them. They're just there for you to understand how we can do it, how we can address, so that our learning intentions, which were right here in the beginning, we are able to achieve them. Okay, free good, economic good, and then in the end. So of course, this is a whole chapter. It's been divided according to a chapter, not according to individual classes per se, but that's what they've said, that this is. So of course, depending on what you're picking up, let's say, for example, I'm just doing opportunity cost with my class, or I'm just doing factors of production with my class. I just pick up those parts over here and I produce this. And I can just go and conduct this in class. Very, very useful, especially if I'm new, or like we had the support earlier where we want more support in delivering of the new syllabus, so it's going to help us. And then there are some homework ideas. Okay, they can do economics dictionary, have their own glossary apart from what's there in the book, so help them use the workbook, right? So there are certain terminologies there. Make sure it's there as part of their work, of if they start an economics dictionary, or if you have a common have maybe a common document where everybody can contribute maybe one word each. So that's going to kind of help that collaboration also to come in. A skill we said is needed when in today's world. And then this similarly goes on for the others. It's important that we understand the language support because a lot of times, like I said, students use a language which is so simple that it does not look like an economics answer. So while we do not say it has to be perfect, we understand that these are young learners, but it is important for us as teachers to reinforce that they have to use the terminology, the terms which are mentioned, right? And encourage them to use, say, land, labor, capital, or entrepreneurship. So we must make sure that they're using the right terms at the right place. And again, to help you plan your activities, you have all these resources in the course book and workbook, and along with the practice questions. So even if you have a shortage of time, you have this lesson plan with you. You just tell them, okay, guys, everybody open to workbook. Let's do practice questions 1 to 5. Okay. Now, this could be end of chapter activity or beginning of chapter activity for the next chapter. So you finish this chapter, you want to start the new one, but you want to revise what's been done. You can just give this workbook activity to them. Give them 5 minutes, should not take more than that because it's just 5 questions which are MCQ type and they are ready to go. And this, of course, continues for each of the chapters. Each one will have a different teaching idea, okay, which you just need to adapt. The idea is we are not teaching in a lecture manner and then doing activities. The idea is do the teaching via the active learning technique. So I'll stop my sharing here. Any questions if you would have at this moment? Giving you just, keep it, you can post it in the Q&A. We'll answer it at the end. Are you able to see this? Planning lessons using planning template? Great then. So this is now a screenshot of what I've just shown you. Like I said, this is linked directly to the syllabus document. If you have the syllabus document with you, you'll be able to see that this is taken right from there. Right? Why is it important to plan learning intentions? Because it helps to understand that we are not going beyond or against the syllabus. It should be a short statement about the goal, and there should be a success criteria in terms of a specific learning task. That's very, very important, right? So discuss challenges, list the rewards of factors of production. The language support we've already talked about. We must make sure that the students have access to glossary, have access to ways and means through which they can develop their economics vocabulary. I think the starter activity is really, really the key to any lesson because if you are able to interest the students in a topic in the first 5 minutes, a lot of our work is done. But if we are not able to, maybe a question that encourages them to think. So, like, for example, over here, what do you think economics is about? Okay. And then everybody has their own points. You could have a discussion, you can have people just showing small whiteboards, whatever works in your scenario. And then kind of, bring in together the responses that everyone's given, something similar to what we did right in the beginning. Okay. The main activities. Okay. Assessment for learning, where you're using the assessment in classroom to raise the learner's achievement. Okay. So you understand where this learner is right now. There are different questioning is a very effective tool to do that. So I know what I want the student to learn. I check whether he's understood that by asking maybe questions or maybe having rag rating or what do you call it, traffic light system. And then what do I need to have? What is it? What is missing? How do I give him that skill? maybe through a certain set of activities which he needs to work with. Differentiation, another very important aspect, uh, which the students can do. There are different ways of doing it, through content, through teaching styles, okay, assessments. But please remember, at the end of the day, the learners have to be prepared for the IGCSE or O levels Cambridge exam. There, the assessment will not be differentiated for them. So they might have certain arrangements made for them, but the paper remains the same. So we must make sure that our students have access to the skills they will need to write the paper at the end. So we can support them during the learning journey, but the goal is that the learning intention has to be taken care of. Okay, this is, I think, one area which kind of gets overlooked in, you know, uh, like someone asked that, how much time should I devote? Because the moment I'm trying to cover my syllabus, do the assessments, give them feedback on the answers, reflection is something which takes a back seat. It is important not only for learners, for us also as teachers, to maybe just take a minute or two to think back on, okay, what worked, what didn't. Maybe just make a voice note. You don't have to type it out and have a long answer. Just make a voice note, and say, okay, fine, I think this worked well today. So that when you're planning for the next class, you kind of take care of it. So teachers can identify the strengths and weaknesses and develop strategies for improvement. It's critical for supporting a teacher's growth and development as a professional, and a plenary, which is coming together, is an opportunity for reflection at the end of the lesson to review that we have met the learning objectives which were covered. Okay, homework is mainly meant for reinforcing classroom learning. Uh, I would suggest use workbook activities as much as possible, because just asking them to do past year papers or questions from past year papers not only becomes monotonous, but I know from experience that students don't, if they don't enjoy it, they will try to run away from it. The idea is homework should reinforce learning. We're not trying to make them do things which they have not done in class already. So it has to be meaningful, stimulating, and challenging for them. So you know the way they're going to move forward. You have a class of people who don't like to write. Maybe give them the short answer type questions which are there, maybe a 2 or a 4 marker, right? And make them do the bulk, the 6 or the 8 markers in class with them. Keep your planning in a manner so that the homework is something that students enjoy doing, even if they know there's a paucity of time. So if it's going to take too much time and there's a lot to write, traditionally what I've seen is students don't enjoy, barring maybe 1 or 2%. Right? So why is it important for us to plan lessons? Because it has strategies to engage learners, provides a framework for active and effective learning. Going back to the mentee, some of us had written planning as one of the two things needed for an effective teaching. So it's important that we visit our planning every year, every time we are delivering the course. So just before you go into a class, just a quick overview. Whether we are an experienced learner or experienced teacher or a new teacher, it's important that we visit our planning, ask key questions that generate analysis, reflection, and thinking, and manage time effectively. That's very, very important, because remember, again, we had this discussion on how much time to devote. To do that, it's important that we go back. If you see, that's why in the lesson plan that was shown to you, there were timing mentioned for the activities. So you know how much time it's going to take, and it just doesn't run away with you. I just have 40 minutes. What can I realistically do in these 40 minutes with my students so that they are able to get the maximum out of my class? Okay, so one more activity I've been speaking quite a lot. How confident are you feeling in using the resources needed, okay, for delivering the new syllabus? Okay, so we've talked about the course book, the workbook, the teacher resources, right? That there are answers to it, and you can access them using Cambridge Go if you want to, or if you're already using physical resources, I think you get access to digital resources. Uh, could you just look at this and tell me again, SC and U, if you can put it in the chat box, please. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. So we move forward to the last part, which is developing. How do I develop my professional practice to improve? Please remember, end of the day, the goal is not only improvement of ourselves, our skills, but also ensuring that we're able to transfer those skills to our learners. So their classroom experience encourages them to develop skills or helps them to develop skills they will use, right? So the aim of this workshop was to understand how to use the Cambridge resources more effectively. Okay. We are not trying to improve classroom practice. So therefore, we could only discuss a couple of strategies. That's not what the aim was. The idea was, how can I use resources which has certain activities? And peer professional development is about improving your skills and competencies and keeping up with the latest approaches in teaching and learning. Of definition, Teacher PD is a structured, facilitated activity for teachers intended to increase their teaching ability. So here the focus was, like I said, more on where to access resources which will help me develop the skills needed, rather than on just, on developing the skills that you are going to need. The focus on teaching ability is intended to include a broad range of skills, which include instruction, classroom management, assessment, and lesson planning. So what is this? What does the flow map for professional development look like? Improve the learning outcomes. Improving learning outcomes reveals a need for improving teaching performance. That's what research has shown. And in order to improve teaching performance, it leads to well-designed training. Then structured, carefully designed training leads to better teacher ability. Improved ability of a teacher leads to greater teacher confidence. So this confidence leads to better learning activities, and we've talked about the resources you will need for these learning activities. The learner-centered activities lead to greater engagement. This engagement gets better learning and therefore includes. So if you see step one, where research has shown that learning outcomes will in order to improve the learning outcomes, we need to improve the teaching performance. And if we go via this flow chart, by providing structured teaching, we are improving the confidence of a teacher, which in turn would help in creating better learning activities, better student engagement, which leads to better skill development in the learners and therefore improved learning outcomes. And like the parents like to say, better results. So preparing to these are the certain training activities, improve knowledge of resource structure and activities, share this knowledge, okay, with the departments. The idea was, what are the resources available for teaching, cascade it with your department teachers, you practice, improve, and this leads to better student outcome. Remember, end of the day, we're talking about our learners. These are certain ways, certain professional development methods that are available with Cambridge. So these are free self-study guides for teachers and leaders. There's orientation, which we did today, free webinar for teachers using Cambridge resources. Then there are structured courses, which are introduction, which is for new teachers, focus on progress, which talks about how to understand the curriculum and assess student progress, what a Cambridge classroom looks like, which are virtual enrichment workshops, and preparing to teach, which is continued professional development using the teacher resources and learner books so that the learning outcomes for the students are better. This is our website, which has all the professional development opportunities in case you feel you need to now understand the teaching strategies better. So the resources are there, but what can I use in the classroom? How can I mark better? Please do go to this website. You could click a picture of this. That's the website. Getting started with this is at a self-paced thing. You can, if you're new, read up on this. Getting started with active learning. Some of a very few percentage, but some of us said we didn't understand active learning as well. So it's a good way to go to this place, go to this part of the Cambridge website using this QR code, and you'll be able to understand how you can introduce this. Right. So at the starting, we'd had certain learning intentions, certain aims for this course. I hope we have met your expectations. I'll go question by question. If you can just type yes or no, so it's going to help me.
Yes, and I have also shared the feedback form link in the chat box. I would request everyone to kindly fill in the feedback form for this session so that we can further introduce such more sessions in the future.
Right. Thanks, Ishani. So I hope we are able to understand the IGCSE and O-level economics program. Now, when I say clear understanding, what I mean is from when we joined to now. Okay, it's not that's like perfect understanding. Do we understand how to set up to teach IGC? Do I understand where to access resources, my planning, what kind of activities? How confident about planning using the resources? We have answered that question. Where can we get further support? Right. So I've shown you some the Cambridge websites where further opportunities for professional development exist. There are also the community pages on the School Support Hub, which you can access. And do you understand the next steps for professional development, which was shown to you earlier? And like Ishani shared, we have the feedback form link, which is here.